smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Conference Championship Week is underway in college basketball, and we have games starting in about 30 minutes from now. A pretty big upset in one of the championship games last night, which we will get to coming up in just a few minutes. We've got some great guests along for the ride as well. Pat Evans joins us from Legal Sports Report. We go over the very latest in the National Football League as well. Simon Applebaum also with us to go over everything happening in sports media and television. And naturally, the National Football League has really taken over the headlines over the last few days with all of these signings and trades and everything that's going on. It's kind of impossible to follow everything, but the good news is that officially today, contracts can be signed. That tampering window ends. The signings are official today. So let's review as to some of the things that you'll be hearing about this afternoon. The first is Derrick Henry, the king, has left Tennessee, and he's headed to the Baltimore Ravens. 2 years, $16 million, up to $20 million with $9 million guaranteed. The Ravens have certainly gone through several running backs over the last few years. Hopefully, Derrick Henry is their one. Patrick Queen, meanwhile, he is leaving Baltimore. He's going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. How about this one? 3 years, $41 million in the division. So really good news here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They continue to add players in the offseason, Russell Wilson and Patrick Queen. They also made a trade yesterday, which we will get to here in just a second. But there you go. Queen signs with the Steelers. Danielle Hunter signs with the Houston Texans, 2 years, $49 million. And the Texans are the team that just keeps on getting better. They added Joe Mixon. They added Hunter. You've already got a great quarterback, and Houston's a heavy favorite, by the way, to win the division next year. How about that? Just a couple of years after rebuilding, they are back on top. Now, as far as news in the NFL is concerned, let's take this one with a grain of salt because you just never know. It's the story of Aaron Rodgers, which is always, you never know with Aaron Rodgers. But RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr., has Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers at the top of his list for vice president of the United States of America. RFK Jr. has spoken, quote, pretty continuously with Aaron Rodgers over the past month about being his vice president. Yes, this is true. Look it up. Patrick Mahomes has restructured cap space, and so the good news is for his contract, he's going to be paid less. The Chiefs can spend a little bit more thanks to Patrick Mahomes after another Super Bowl championship. The Pittsburgh Steelers have traded Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers for a cornerback and a pick swap. And by the way, Brock Bowers, who's expected to be a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft, is supposed to have his pro day, but inevitably is having to postpone that due to several nagging injuries. He is going to work out on April the 10th now for teams. Keep an eye on this because Bowers could be even a top 10 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. All right, North Carolina sports betting underway. ESPN makes the announcement yesterday as ESPN Bet is joining all of the other companies who are live online right now in North Carolina. They're going to have a big party on the 15th of March. Stephen A. Smith's going to be there. Should be fun. Maybe you should go. Peyton Manning is going to be part of NBC's Paris Olympic coverage in 2024 and the opening ceremonies broadcast, he told Jimmy Fallon last night on NBC. Amit Patel, if you don't know his name, you may not be familiar. He is the individual who stole a lot of money from the Jacksonville Jaguars, and now we don't have to say alleged anymore. He's been sentenced to 6.5 years in prison and also has to pay $21 million in restoration. He used a lot of this money to gamble and play fantasy sports, and also he has to go through Gamblers Anonymous. So this story now comes officially to a close. Garrett Cole, as we know, still waiting results on that MRI that he had on his right elbow. The Yankees have been pretty cagey. They really haven't said anything as far as he is concerned. Got good news yesterday on Aaron Judge, but as far as Cole is concerned, still a wait-and-see approach. Yesterday on Coast to Coast, Davis Maddock was on there yesterday with Carver. These guys are going back and forth. Davis Maddock in particular, not pretty bullish at all on the New York Yankees, and obviously not the best start as they enter the season potentially without two of their biggest stars.
It's not even Patty's Day yet,
and the Yankees have all kinds of problems, Davis. What a bad scene for them.
It's really, it's not the start of the season that you want to have when you're the New York Yankees. This is supposed to be a more, this last season was a nightmare. Billy McKinney in there, just Isaiah kind of Falefo had, I think, the 6th most plate appearances on the team. Jake Bauers is in there, leading off some days for the Yankees. It was just such a mess. And this season was supposed to be different. We were supposed to have Judge healthy, Stanton healthy. They're going to make a real run out of it. And of course, we're beginning the season with the 2 most important players on the team, Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole, already banged up. Maybe the Aaron Judge thing will end up being nothing in the end. And if I'm going to try and make an excuse for Boone and for Judge, I guess I would say this. Clearly, the Yankees fans they absolutely hate how often and how injured Aaron Judge has been. So to say he's worn down, he needs a rest, whatever, maybe you're just trying to shield him from a little bit of criticism or whatever. I don't know if I really buy that. I don't really even know if that's a good excuse for not being the guy had to have an MRI on his abs. He's feeling a little bit banged up. But that's whatever. But the Garrett Cole injury, if he really is not ready for opening day, which is what Boone said it'd be optimistic, what do you even do? Garrett Cole is the only super strong pitcher on that roster, I guess, assuming that Carlos Rodon doesn't come anything back to form. I guess you and I both know how this ends, which is they're the team that ends up paying Blake Snell. Blake Snell tries to ramp up to get ready for opening day as fast as he can, and he gets hurt, right? That's what happens.
All right, thanks very much, Davis. And naturally, the Yankees will open up on the 28th with most of Major League Baseball's teams. Of course, the Padres and Dodgers play overseas coming up real soon. All right, if the NCAA tournament is bracing for upsets, last night is a pretty good indication. I think we could get a lot this coming season. The reign for Gonzaga ends last night. 4 straight conference championship wins comes to a close. They lose to St. Mary's. This is not the best Gonzaga team we've seen. 69-60, St. Mary's 3.5-point underdogs going into the game. The Big 12 men and women's tournaments will stay in Kansas City through 2031, the announcement made yesterday. Stanford star Cameron Brink declares for the WNBA draft. She's expected to be the number 2 pick overall. Of course, you know who the first pick is by now. It's going to be Caitlin Clark. And also, Mark Madsen was extended as the head coach of Cal basketball through 29-30. So if you're doing the math there, it's another 8 or 9 years for Mark Madsen there. Okay, in the NBA last night, big injury. Kawhi Leonard goes down for the Los Angeles Clippers. We'll see what ends up happening here. A back injury and the loss of the Timberwolves 114-94. Karl Anthony Towns, he had that surgery on his meniscus, return TBD. The Knicks win. OG Anunoby was back in that game yesterday, and Steph Curry is not going to play tonight against the Mavericks, but he is expected to rejoin the team on Friday. So what does the upset last night of St. Mary's beating Gonzaga mean for the Zags going into the NCAA tournament? Mike DeCourcy joins us and previews the afternoon slate now.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This
is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8 point dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5 point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you on it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes, and they actually played, I guess you would call it, somewhat defense.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to minus 170 price, followed by SGA at plus 250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, like something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything he's doing. I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The early line, only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live, all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smarty.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. You're going to be seeing Michael DeCourcy a lot over the span of the next week and a half, 2, 3, 4 weeks, if he has time for the NCAA tournament. It's Conference Championship week this week. We've got the first round of the NCAA tournament coming up next week, and then the Sweet 16, Final Four. So, Mike, brace yourself. Here we go. It gets real now. The first couple of days, obviously there's some afternoon games, WCC Championship, but naturally now you're going to see the Big East and the ACC and all these tournaments really get underway. And then all of a sudden we got the semifinals and finals coming up this week. So are you ready? Are you prepared for the madness?
I am ready as I can be on 3 hours of sleep a night, Craig. There's a lot going on, but I try to stay on top of all of it.
Yeah. Well, last night was a late night then for you. If you watched the West Coast Championship, which started, I believe, at 9 p.m. Eastern. So I did not see the whole thing, but as I was watching the first half of the game, I thought to myself, okay, this is the Gonzaga team that I've been watching for the majority of the season outside of the last couple of weeks. They ain't that great. St. Mary's beats Gonzaga. I mean, the Zags have been amazing over the last, 20 years in the NCAA tournament, even the regular season. They won 4 straight conference titles, but St. Mary's ends up winning the series this year, 2 out of 3, which doesn't happen all that often. And I guess, Michael, the question is, was it fool's gold believing what we've seen from the Zags, where they, climbed back into the top 25, started playing much better, or do you think that this was just a blip with them losing last night?
Well, I think if you get Graham Ike off the floor for 21 minutes out of 40, you're going to win. If you're at all competent offensively, you get him off the floor for that much time and you're going to win. They got better when he became the player I thought he would be. He had 7 consecutive 20-point games down the stretch into the conference tournament. He only had 10 in the San Francisco game, but it wasn't really that much in doubt. I didn't really worry about that. But they got him in foul trouble last night. They did a good defensive job, St. Mary's did. And certainly there are other assets on the offense for Gonzaga, but it doesn't work if he's not a factor. That's when they're really good. And credit to St. Mary's for making sure that didn't happen. On the contrary, we saw the Aiden Mahaney for St. Mary's that we expected to see for most of this year. He's gotten better of late, but last night he was dominant. And that's the player that he suggested as a freshman he would be. He had a very fine sophomore year, but not a dominant one. And he suggested last season that he was capable of this. That player could be very dangerous in the NCAA tournament, making shots, playing great defense. He did a wonderful job on Nembhard. I thought that St. Mary's did exactly what they needed to do to win the game. And Gonzaga is only going to win the games in this tournament that Graham Ike not only shows up for, but stakes around for.
Yeah. And do you think that the odds are fair here over on FanDuel, which basically state that Gonzaga has a better chance to win the NCAA tournament, or at least, the betting favorite over St. Mary's? Is that fair, despite the fact that, St. Mary's is, in the end, you say they've had a better regular season and better postseason. They beat the Zags. There's nothing else to add at this point. You can look at it any way you want, but what do you think about those odds?
There's probably a little more raw talent on Gonzaga's team than there is on St. Mary's. But to be honest with you, those are fantasy odds. Neither of those teams is going to win the national championship. They don't have enough ability to do it. Rim protection, not there. The NBA level talent, not there. They're very fine college basketball teams. And I think Aiden Mahaney will be a pro, and I think some of the Zags guys will be a pro, but I don't think either team has on it a likely first-round pick in any future NBA draft. Maybe in a year or so, Mahaney will develop into that, but you need more than those two teams have to win the 6 games in this deal. It's really hard.
Yeah. All right. 45 minutes away from tip-off here in the ACC tournament, and then games throughout the day. So that couch of yours is going to get a lot of usage, I would guess, today, Michael, as we start here at noon. Okay, so tempo is the story in this game here between Florida State and Virginia Tech. One of the higher totals on the board, 152 over on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Tech is minus 3.5-point favorites. So this shapes up to be a high-scoring, exciting game. You think it ends up being the case?
I think it very much can be, especially when you play in a conference tournament atmosphere where there's not a lot of fan pressure, or one of those noon games that not everybody's in the building for. I think Virginia Tech will probably have a decent following, but it's a long way to go from Tallahassee to D.C. to follow a team that has not had a great year. So I don't expect there'll be a lot of Seminoles there. It's not that far a drive for Virginia Tech, so they might show. But I think that'll help Virginia Tech in this game. I think the fact that Virginia Tech closed the season reasonably well by the standards they set for themselves anyway. They had a decent finish to the year. And so I think that looks just about right for Virginia Tech to get home in the fashion that their supporters would desire.
All right, 3.5-point favorites there. Then the 12:30 Eastern tip will be Central Florida taking on BYU. I know, certainly the Knights have been up and down this season, and not a lot of support here for them as BYU's 5.5-point favorites total 144.5.
Yeah, this is an important game, Craig, for BYU. They're climbing the seed board with some of their recent results, coupled with the terrific road win they had at Allen Fieldhouse over Kansas. So they need to get this done. If they take an L here, you're talking about dropping multiple lines. So this is a really important game for them. They have showed up for the important games, the ones that were absolutely vital, including that Allen game where they needed that to say, okay, all these metrics here, you got to believe them. Because for a lot of the year, it was metric, but not much in the way of results. Now they're starting to give you the wins that you want to see in the tougher games. So I think BYU will show up for this game ready to go because they know what's at stake.
All right, now let's get to Oklahoma and TCU. And Mike, if you didn't know any better, the Sooners have actually been playing, better basketball. I know they lost to Texas last weekend, but, played very well against Cincinnati. They ended up beating them, played very well against the number 1 team in the country in Houston. Are they getting right at the right time here? They're 1.5-point underdogs today against the Horned Frogs.
Yeah, this is an interesting game because you don't know what you're getting from either team from game to game. At TCU, it's really more half to half with the Horned Frogs. They show up, they play great, and then they fade. So this is a game, personally, I would stay away from because I don't trust either team. When I don't trust either side, I don't want to have any part of it. I just don't think that TCU has the ability to come out and wipe Oklahoma up. But I don't think we'll see that because they just don't deliver consistently. So for me, this is a pass.
All right. Rutgers, Maryland, 6 p.m. Eastern, total 125.5. Low total here. Terrapins minus 3.5-point favorites. I don't love either team here, Mike, and in particular, Rutgers is really falling apart here down the stretch. Is this a coin flip type game? Would you dare take the points here with Rutgers?
I don't think I would go with Rutgers at this stage. I don't have any evidence of this, and no one has told me this. All I have is what I see, and Cliff Amore is not the same player. And Cliff, his defense, his intensity, his leadership, his energy are the essential ingredients of what has been one of the 3 or 4 best defenses in college basketball. And there's something missing there. And I can't believe he all of a sudden decided not to care after 4 years of putting every ounce of energy he has into playing. So I have to think there's something a little bit wrong with his health. And so for that reason, if I were going to go on this game, I would go with the Maryland and trust Jameer Young to bring me home.
3.5-point favorites over on FanDuel. Great games coming up today and tonight. Mike, I know you'll be watching, and we'll see you again soon here on NewsWire. Thanks for coming on. We'll be right back.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in. This is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8-point dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5 underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you won it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes, and they actually played, I guess you would call it somewhat defense.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to minus 170 price, followed by SGA at plus 250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to, like, 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, like something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything he's doing. Like, I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The early line only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. The big story in sports betting this week has been the start of sports wagering online in North Carolina. We have that to talk about and a whole lot more with Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report. And Pat, look, North Carolina is like, sort of the South. I mean, South Carolina is like considered more the South, which is odd because they're like next to each other. But I thought that maybe this would get things going, in Alabama and Georgia. And I guess we're going to talk about those two states today and see what the progress is. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you as always for having me on, Craig. I'm excited to be here and talking about these things with you, particularly like North Carolina, because a huge story this week for sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's start off with Georgia here. And this has been a case of, I don't know if the reporting is accurate. I mean, I guess that's kind of the problem here is that when it comes to politics, you could go either side. So it's like one day I feel like I read a story about sports betting being legalized in Georgia, and I think there's hope. And then the next day I hear not only is there not hope, but it's never going to happen. What is today's story with Georgia? Where do we stand?
Well, there was a committee hearing yesterday that restarted the discussion for sports betting in the chamber, in the House. Of course, the Senate overwhelmingly passed bipartisanly a sports betting package earlier this year. And it's sat since, I think it passed on February 1st. So it sat all of last month, nearly halfway through this month. And we're just kind of watching this kind of on our hands. I mean, there's no, to your point, I mean, there's no indication that this is going to be any different than previous years, which in previous years, Georgia has just kind of run into this weird partisan politic fighting that is happening in, most states, of course, and nationally, but in particularly this state of Georgia, which is a very key state in, national politics when you look at it. So that the focus there is kind of what are the Republicans doing that are upsetting the Democrats, and what are the Democrats doing that the Republicans are saying no way, because the Republicans do have a majority there. And that's important because, as we've talked about, ad nauseum on this program, is to get things passed in state legislators, sports betting wise, you need bipartisan support, because there's people on the Republican side who don't like it, and there's people on the Democrat side who don't like it. So they have to come together. But in years past, there's been things that made the Democrats mad enough that they dug their feet in and said, we're not going to help pass this, sports betting bill because you made us that mad. And it kind of looks like something similar will happen this year. That's what sources are telling me anyway. But hey, the discussion that started back up yesterday is, some progress, but they only have till March 28th. That's when the session ends. So it's not super long till then. They said they're going to work on the bill. There's another committee hearing today that they'll kind of add some amendments and stuff, which means that if it gets through the House by whatever chance it does, the Senate will have to concur, or it goes to a conference committee, which that'll take time. So this March 28th date kind of looms huge in the future. And then you have the Senate resolution for the constitutional amendment, which was added in the Senate. And, sources are wary about that because they think to pass it, you'll need the Sports Betting Alliance and sports books to say, yeah, we're in this. We want to fund the ballot initiative that it would take, but that's expensive. And we know that there's something going on in Missouri in that same realm that is also expensive. And, I had somebody say, if it fails, then you set Georgia back 5 years. But yeah, again, restarting the conversation yesterday, important. At least there's some sort of movement, but time's ticking. Politics, as usual, gets in the way, and sports betting just really isn't that important of an issue to most politicians.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And speaking of not being important, I got a kick out of reading this today that the Alabama legislature is on spring break, so we won't hear anything until the 19th of March. I was like, wait a second here. Look, I know my daughter and my son have spring break. Pat, do I get spring break here at SportsGrid? Do you get spring break at Legal Sports Report? Well, I guess that's what's going on in Alabama. And, optimism, aside from them just hanging out at the beach all day, getting sports betting seems to be a little bit waning.
Yeah. So, yes, they are on spring break. I also find a little humor in that because they don't meet all that long when you look at it. They're not in a multiple semester year as your kids are. But, hey, they need to think about things. And actually, that's what came up last week when the House passed or the Senate passed a sports bet, or didn't have sports betting, a gambling bill. They said the Senate is receiving it back, and they said we get to take spring break to look at it and see what we want to do and go from there. So the spring break might actually be beneficial here. This is a crazy state in the world of sports betting because, in the past, they're one of 5 states without. So let's start there. This comprehensive gambling bill largely legalizes the lottery. That's what most of the politicians want because, the constituents want it. They haven't had a chance to vote on it since 1999, so you might as well give them a chance. But in years past, the whole bill started in the Senate and included sports betting, included casinos. Well, it started in the House this year, and you get that through. And when the Senate bills went over, the House kind of said, no, we don't want this. Well, this year it started in the House, sent it to the Senate, and the Senate said, no, let's not do it this way. So it is kind of interesting when you look at it that way. And the Senate stripped the casinos out of it, stripped sports betting out of it. And so now it's a lottery bill with some pari-mutuel wagering, as well as historical horse racing machines, which are basically slot machines that they can have at bingo halls and the like. But now it goes back to the House where, they say, who knows? Maybe they put sports betting back in. Maybe they do put the casinos back in. We don't think it will be a concurrence, so it will be going to conference committee after spring break here, and we'll see kind of what emerges out of that. Could be almost anything, it seems like. So Alabama is certainly not fully dead yet. It doesn't look great, but hey, a lottery is a step in the right direction for sports betting proponents, and maybe it's next year that an online sports betting bill gets through in Alabama if it doesn't get added this year.
All right. A couple of things to end with here, Pat. Let's start off by talking about this interesting story where in Maryland, they're talking about the success failures potentially from a case study in online casinos in Maryland. So I do want to start there. And if you have any, thoughts or updates as we end on what's going on in North Carolina this week, I know ESPN Bet is now joining on too. I don't know if there's anything new to report there. Certainly, it seems to be going okay. Like, we're not hearing anything negative. Nobody complaining about depositing money, withdrawing money. So that's always a good sign.
Yeah. So let's start with the Maryland thing. There was actually an update yesterday in a committee. This is Maryland was the one state coming into this year that looked like it's a possibility that online casino gets passed, and it's still alive, of course. And we had a subcommittee hearing yesterday that got kind of altered the licensing tier system, and in Maryland, diversity and inclusion is hugely important to the legislators. So they added some stipulations there for, the casinos can have up to 3 online skins, but they have to, 5% of the first license has to go to this partner that is a equity partner, and then to get the second license, you have to pledge 33% of the revenue to this partner. And so, it's a little bit different than the sports betting route that they went, that a lot of people are saying, that wasn't exactly the right way to do it. It's not, really ensuring diversity and inclusion in the sports betting industry. So we'll see what happens there. But again, that's just the subcommittee. So then it has to go to the committee, then the House floor. And on the Senate side, the same thing. There's a Senate bill that's in a committee still, and it has to get through the Senate committee, then the floor. And they only have till March 18th for the crossover deadline. So those are on a tight timeline, much like in Georgia. So we'll see. Just the talk and this progress of getting these things kind of framed out and in the right spot potentially bodes well for future years. I think we've talked about it before on the show. Online casino is not going to be the big wave that sports betting was. It's going to take time for legislators to kind of chip away, to educate people, to say, hey, this is why it's beneficial to have an open, regulated market, bringing things in from an illegal market and having consumer protections in place. Yeah, it does increase problem gambling that is out in the open, but maybe you don't catch it in the long run if it's not out in the open or if it's not legalized. And it's the same thing with all these betting problems that you're seeing at the collegiate level or any of these quote unquote scandals. The reason they're caught so quickly is because it is a regulated market. So, again, we'll see what happens in Maryland, but it's at least some progress going forward. As for North Carolina, you're right. I mean, we haven't heard much of anything in terms of problems or, anything really. But it is going to be a really fun state to watch. Our Eric Ramsey projects $7 billion in the next year wagered. That would pretty much put it in the top 5 markets, which is big. And then there's kind of interesting roots off of that. It is, especially with it launching right now, college basketball or basketball betting. What does it end up? Does it become the top basketball betting state? We'll see. And then there's the NASCAR factor. I think to the point of view in the South, NASCAR certainly has a large following in the South, and North Carolina might be the first state that really sees a big push in that realm. So a lot of fun storylines in NASCAR, and of course we'll keep you up to date on everything we learn from there.
All right, Pat, great stuff as always. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy your Spartans this weekend in the tournament. We'll talk next week.
We'll see. Thanks, Craig.
All right, we'll take a quick break. We got Simon Applebaum coming up next. Some new news regarding sports betting. Click away. Don't go away.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is a guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This
is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8 dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5 point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you on it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes? And they actually played, I guess you would call it somewhat defense.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to -170 price, followed by SGA at +250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything he's doing. I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The early line only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats in fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
Always heard me say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live, all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart Team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
back to NewsWire. The NCAA tournament begins next week, and this week we'll get the seeding. We got the selection show coming up here on SportsGrid on Sunday night. Ben Stevens, Donnie Rightside on the early line, going to be covering this extensively next week, as will we here on NewsWire. And Ben Stevens, by the way, has a special look at the latest odds to win the NCAA tournament. Ben, of course, has already planted his flag on Purdue University. That's his team going into the tournament. Let's take a look at their odds and everyone else.
Craig, Conference Championship Week is here around the country in college basketball. And all of the high major conferences, as of today, will start their conference tournaments. So we look at the national title odds just a half week away from Selection Sunday. Here we go. Connecticut in the Big East tournament, where we are in Manhattan. Craig, this morning I walked into studio right past Dan Hurley, the head coach of the Huskies, and their star big man, Donovan Clingan. This is Tristan Newton, a triple-double machine for UConn. The reigning national champs, plus 480, favored to cut down the nets in early April for a second consecutive season. Looking to go back-to-back for the first time in men's college basketball at the Division I level since your Florida Gators in 2006 and 2007. Less than $2 behind the Houston Cougars, plus 650 for the Cougs. Champions of the Big 12 in their first year in the most difficult conference in all of college basketball. Purdue, winners of the Big 10 for a second straight year, plus 750. Now a dollar gap from Houston and the Boilermakers. And then, Craig, you see almost double the price to every other team that we have around the country. That includes Arizona and Tennessee, 14-1 for the Wildcats, 14-1 for the Volunteers. These five teams, Craig, Connecticut, Houston, Purdue, Arizona, Tennessee, those were the champions of their regular season crown in their respective conferences. Add in North Carolina, a 22-1 price on UNC, the champions of the ACC. Now, the ACC tournament already underway. We will see the Tar Heels on Thursday in quarterfinal action. We won't see Purdue until Friday at the Big Ten tournament in quarterfinal action, also earning a double bye. Same with Arizona. We will see Tennessee in a few days as well in quarterfinal action. UConn will get things started on day number 2 at the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden tomorrow. So the high major level enters Conference Championship Week, where the best teams in the country will start to take the court. Those, the national championship odds, under a week away from Selection Sunday.
Can't wait for that. Of course, catch us Sunday afternoon and into the night on the latest on the brackets and the NCAA tournament. All right, lots of news to unpack in sports betting as far as media is concerned this week. We always bring in Simon Applebaum to get an update on that, and boy, do we have a lot to discuss. So let's bring in Simon and kind of go over the latest landscape. Simon, we got some big news, I know, to review here, and I know that's something that you have been clamoring for, which is the ability to watch sports, betting live on your screen. Seems like somebody has taken the first step toward that.
Absolutely, Craig. Great to be with you. We're going to talk about that in a second. First, 3 bits of breaking news. Apple TV Plus, the folks behind Ted Lasso, has just greenlighted a new Owen Wilson starring and executive producing sports comedy. Wilson's going to play a ex-golf pro on the skids. He decides to back a young sports prodigy in the world of golf. That will hopefully be on late this year or 2025 for sure. Also, we learned that Kelly Clarkson, Peyton Manning, and Mike Tirico will be the host for the opening ceremonies of the Summer Olympics on July 26th. Coverage on NBC and Peacock at noon, Telemundo Spanish language at 1. And for the first time, the opening ceremonies will not be in a stadium. It will be along the River Seine. There'll be boats that will carry the athletes and other dignitaries on the Seine to the Eiffel Tower. That's where Clarkson, Manning, and Tirico will be. Also, the Today Show hosts Samantha Guthrie and Holy Cope will be part of the event. And finally, NFL Network is putting together a Matthew Stafford documentary with the famed LA Rams quarterback. That will be on NFL Network in mid-April. So a lot of things have been popping in the TV sports world, particularly over the last 48 hours, Craig.
All right. Thanks very much for that update, Simon. Now let's get to it here. DraftKings partnering with Xfinity. Something called Odds Zone is coming to your screen very soon. Tell us what it is.
In fact, Craig, it started yesterday, and we may come to know March 12th yesterday as the day that the era of sports betting on television officially began. Here's the way it works. It is on and available to Xfinity, Comcast Cable, X1 customers. Now, in order to use Odds Zone and bet, 3 things. You have to be an X1 customer. You have to be in a state that allows sports betting, and you have to be in a state where DraftKings owns a sports book, because Comcast and DraftKings are partnered up in this venture. So here's the way it works. You turn on OddsZone. You get the latest odds on the Players Golf Championship, which really kicks in tomorrow. If you want to make a bet, you will see a QR code on your TV screen. You take your smartphone, put it up against the screen, scan the code. You then get the opportunity to trigger the bet using your mobile phone. We know that in addition to the Players Championship, you will be able through OddsZones to bet on March Madness, both the men's and women's tournaments. You will be able to bet on Major League Baseball, the NBA and the NHL playoffs. Olympics, we don't know yet. Hopefully maybe next week when NBC Universal, the parent of Comcast, has their annual One Technology Conference. We'll see if they have anything to say about the possibility of OddsZone becoming a way to bet on the Summer Olympic Games. But the big thing is, this is the first example of sports betting on the television set. 3 questions. 1, who is next? Keep in mind that DraftKings also owns a television network that's available on Samsung Smart TV sets. Will it be FanDuel? Will it be DraftKings? Will it be ESPN Bet in advance of ESPN taking on sports betting as a mega content service as part of their whole reconstitute mega content service next year? And don't forget also, you have the possibility of, if not soon down the road, of doing the whole betting process on the television set. We know Roku may have the ability to do that. Telly, the TV disruptor trying to be the iPhone television, we've talked about this in the show before, they may be able to do that. The question is, when will they spring that, or will there be another outside player do it? Keep in mind, in order to have the whole process on the television set, what I hear from the sports betting establishment is you have to make sure that the process on the TV set all the way through is secure, that there's no technical gaps or there's no security slip-ups. If that's the case, we may soon see the era of sports betting take off from just this one OddsZone deal to a whole big deal across the whole TV spectrum.
Yeah, it would be fascinating, and to see the first step being taken today, or as you said, yesterday, is really the beginning of what the future is going to look like. All right, speaking of which, we learned more about the future of the National Basketball Association partnering a new deal with Disney and Warner Brothers, and TV rights just such a huge deal right now, Simon, for all the major sports. So no surprise here as the NBA makes this announcement.
And the negotiations started at the start of the week, Craig, and here's what we know right now. It's an exclusive window for negotiating with Walt Disney, with Warner Bros. Discovery, their various cable networks, and in the case of Disney, ABC, and the NBA. We hear that they're about 3/4 of the way to making a deal, and they have until April 11th to do that. Now, they're not the only players that the NBA, we understand, is negotiating with. They are talking to NBC about a possible broadcast window for games. They're also talking with Apple TV and Amazon. In the case of Apple and Amazon, it may be for certain parts of the season, like the in-season tournament that was started this season, or maybe the play-in games leading to the NBA playoffs. So right now, what the strategy is, NBA, you deal with Warner Bros. Discovery and Disney first. See if during this exclusive window of negotiations you get the deal done before April 11th, and then you go to NBC, and then you go to the mega content services like Amazon Prime Video and Apple. Incidentally, also this week, very interesting, while the negotiations started, True TV is now becoming a weeknight all-sports service. It's from 6 p.m. on into late night. They will be running the simulcasts of the NBA games and NHL games on TNT. They'll be doing simulcasts of those games, alternate formats, if you will. We don't know yet all the particulars. They are already doing a 6 p.m. Sports Center type show, half hour. They're doing a sports betting show called The Line at 6:30, leading into whatever sports they've got. They will be doing documentaries. Those will be other sports specials. We'll see how it all plays out. So this is a big move by True TV to get back into the original programming game. And how do you do it? You get with sports. And, of course, next week they will be covering their parts of March Madness along with CBS, TBS, and TNT.
Yeah, True TV, for people who are not familiar, is where you can watch the coverage of some of the tournament, in the NCAA tournament. I know every year it's like, where's True TV? People are trying to find it. I guess that's our next topic here, Simon. And by the way, the women's tournament this year, I think is going to be supremely popular as well. Let's go to it here. Men's coverage, women's coverage, always that initial dynamic for people who want to watch the tournament. Simon, so many people travel to Las Vegas for this, or at least they used to. They go to the Bahamas. They want to watch all the games in bed. You can do it now from your home, right? Like, you just pull up your phone in a lot of these states and do it. Any difference in any of the coverage this year? Any quirks we may see that people will find interesting?
Well, on the men's side, you are going to see a new lead announcer. For the first time ever, Jim Nantz is gone. Ian Eagle is now the lead announcer. He's going to be joined by Grant Hill and Bill Rafferty rather than Jim Smarkle, his longtime partner on the CBS games. We are going to see a couple of quirks. One, I believe we're going to see the first female play-by-play person on the games going from first and second round and maybe the regional finals. Her name is Lisa Byington. I hear she's really, really good. And she is going to be, I believe, the first female play-by-play commentator on the men's tournament. In addition, we're going to have Kevin Harlan back in a major role. We're going to have Spiro Didis back. Andrew Catalan looks like he is the up-and-comer in terms of coverage. He's going to be able to do first, second-round games. And also Brad Nesser is going to be doing at least first and second round games as well. On the women's side, again this year, ESPN is going to have all the games first round on. They're going to have individual games on individual networks, one game on ESPN, one game on ESPN2 at various times. And I have a hunch, again, that if they decide to make the women's basketball final a evening game, not a Sunday afternoon game, they will have an all-time record. Incidentally, remember, Craig, last week we told you about Fox, and we told you that their average for the women's basketball games was better than the men's basketball games. Well, Awful Announcing this morning, the Awful Announcing, the great sports media website, did a story about that. And sure enough, yes, the average women's basketball coverage on Fox, more viewership than the men's.
Well, I got to tell you, Caitlin Clark has really changed the game in the way that people watch this, and I wouldn't expect that to change at all next week as well. Okay, so Fox Friday night has been broadcasting the WWE for many years. We've seen, sort of this college football takeover, Simon. On Friday night, it used to be dominated by high school sports, and, college sort of stayed away from that, but not anymore. Fox is going all in on Friday night college football, aren't they?
Yeah, and it was a simple deal. SmackDown goes off this fall. They had a hole to fill on Friday nights. Hey, you've got Big Ten college football coverage, you got Mountain West coverage, you got Big 12 coverage, so why not fill it with a Friday night game of the week? Which, by the way, they did for the Pac-12 championship. They've had on Friday nights rather than Saturdays. So given the success that Fox has had the last couple of years on Saturday afternoon football with their Big Ten kickoff, they are now taking that and making Friday night a big deal. Which is a good move by Fox. They're going to go up against ESPN, which has been doing Friday night college football for years, as well as CBS Sports Network and other players. So I think Fox is an opportunity to really go head-to-head with ESPN in particular on the college football coverage on Friday nights. And don't be surprised if Gus Johnson becomes the major Friday night college football play-by-play person. Yeah, Gus is great. Okay, real quick here. We got a minute to go, Simon. April 18th. My birthday, ironically, the debut of a new documentary, and tell us more about where we can watch it and what's it all about. Well, that's what I told you earlier. This is the Matthew Stafford documentary that NFL Network is producing. It will go on April 18th on that network. And this is NFL Network saying, hey, we want to be part of the sports documentary deal that Netflix and other folks are getting into in a big way. All right, Simon, great stuff. Action-packed edition of the show here with you today, and I know a lot to unpack the rest of the week and next week as well. You and I, I'm sure, will talk then. Have a great rest of your week. You too, Craig. Take care. Enjoy the basketball this weekend. All right. Simon Applebaum also, his podcast tomorrow will be televised, an extension of his coverage here on NewsWire. We'll be right back to wrap it up now.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Kentucky on the road as a 7-8 dog, beat Tennessee by 4. North Carolina as a 5.5 point underdog, beat Duke on the road.
I took Kentucky plus the points. I think you won it as well. I even said I wouldn't be shocked if they won it. I'm not shocked. They're just that good. It's can they be focused for 40 minutes, and they actually played, I guess you would call it somewhat defense.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
How about this? Nikola Jokic, heavy favorite here to -170 price, followed by SGA at plus 250, and Luka Doncic at a 7-1 price.
It would require a whole lot from Luka to 15 of the next 20 games he has to have triple doubles, something absurd. And it really just comes down to Jokic being amazing, doing everything that he's doing. I hate to say it, but he's probably had this locked up the second Embiid was announced out.
The early line, only on SportsGrid. SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. Pro League Soccer, powered by Marca.
I would be willing to bet the under 2.5 goals.
Fantasy sports today.
Especially in head-to-head formats and fantasy, I think I'm going to go with Juan Soto.
Game time decisions.
People don't like it. I don't really care. I cannot believe anybody is betting the Clippers at this number.
Betting above the rim.
All I've heard you say on the network is you're either winning or you're rebuilding.
In-game live all access.
Nobody has been more profitable as a dog than Shaka Smart team.
Winning back-to-back road games. I don't care if they're playing Topeka High. I wouldn't give them any chance whatsoever.
In-game live, prime time.
Back-to-back, just utterly stinker quarters.
In-game live, overtime.
Honestly, as you sit here and listen, watch right now, you may want to consider placing that bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I hope you will stick with us here on the grid because we got some great programming coming up. The early line followed by Coast to Coast and no doubt coverage of the conference basketball tournaments that are going on right now. In fact, we have games going on as we speak and also games coming up. So here's a quick preview. St. Joe's and George Mason currently in progress right now. Florida State will take on Virginia Tech in 12 minutes. That's a noon Eastern start. UCF takes on BYU. Cougars 5.5 point favorites at 12:30. And then Rice takes on Wichita State at 1 p.m. Eastern start. Wichita State -3.5 point favorites against Rice. So those are just some of the games coming up. It is so much fun to just flip around your TV or pull up an app on your phone, just watch college basketball all day long. Hopefully you can do that as well as keeping it locked here on SportsGrid as well, and we'll cover that for you on tomorrow's show, no question about that. All right, want to thank Simon Applebaum for coming on the show. Also, thanks to Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report. And, of course, always thanks to our guest contributors from Sporting News as well. Today, we had Michael DeCourcy on and talking college basketball. Michael, you can see, by the way, all over SportsGrid all weekend long. We got our big show coming up on Sunday with the selection show. And by the way, for those of you who may be interested in the upcoming baseball season, I know we didn't get into it a lot today. It's kind of hard with so much happening. It still is spring training. We do have some great fantasy baseball content for those interested. It is Saturday morning here on SportsGrid and Sunday morning. I host with Davis Maddock on Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, and then Joe Pisapia from Fantasy Pros and Matt Stryker, who you may see all over here on SportsGrid, as well as some other spots as well. He is on Sunday morning here. So if you're getting ready for a fantasy baseball draft, I know a lot of you are doing that soon. Make sure you tune into that show. So again, early line next. Carver and Friends coming up on Coast to Coast, 3 o'clock Eastern. I'll see you right back here tomorrow for our next edition of NewsWire. Thanks to our associate producer, Frank, our producer, Michael. I'm Craig Mish. This has been NewsWire on SportsGrid, and I'll see you tomorrow for the same show here at 11 a.m. Eastern. Have a great day, everyone.
Grid.